All right, let's go ahead and get started with changing these rotors. I'm gonna go ahead and pull this big jack out. And my FMCSA paperwork just came today too, so we're pretty much ready to go. We just gotta do a couple more things, and then of course the tags. That's the last thing I'm waiting for by the end of this week. Hopefully I can get to DMV, but that's the last thing I gotta wait for. And once I do that, we're ready to hit the road. So when I looked online to try and get a quick reference of how to change these rotors, I couldn't find anything. There's literally like nothing out there to show you what to do. It's not that difficult. It's kind of easy to figure out, but I figure I'd make a video on how to replace these rotors for anybody out there that has their own truck. Well, okay, well, this is the F750. So this is a Ford vehicle, but I can't imagine it being that much harder for an International or a Hino to change these rotors out. I just want to show you what you're up against if you plan to do such a job or such a task. And it saves you, I would say, several hundred to maybe even 1,000 or two when it comes to doing this yourself. You know, spend the day and do your own maintenance, and you can log your own maintenance for stuff like this. If you're a female, I just got to say, these parts are heavy. The tires are heavy. Most of the components are big lug nuts that take a lot of torque, but I use a cheat code, which is my Milwaukee impact wrench, the half inch M18. This thing is wonderful and fantastic, and I use it pretty much in every single bolt. I'm not trying to, you know, be Superman out here and fight this stuff, but there's no getting around the heavy parts once you lift the heavy parts. So if you're a female, fair warning, you can do it, but these parts are heavy. You got to be, you know, really strong and capable. Yeah, so let's go ahead and get started taking these things off. First, we'll start with the lug nuts. Actually, I got to put the jack under there first, but then we'll start with the lug nuts, take this thing off, and go ahead and get it ready to go. Okay, so if you take a look at the rotors, these are stress cracks, and then the age and the rustiness of these rotors. That's kind of why I wanted to replace them. So the first thing I'm gonna do is spray a penetrator onto these bolts, just to give them a little time. I want to use something to penetrate these bolts a little bit, because when I get to using that impact to take these off, it's literally going to strip this thread right here because they're so rusty. So like I said, I use the impact for pretty much every aspect of this job, because I don't want to fight it. So use power when you can. The next thing you have to do, these brakes actually come out before the caliper comes off, which is cool. So you take this bolt off to remove this bracket, and then the brakes slide right out. Okay, I had to depress one of the pistons to get the rotor to turn on the inside. So basically, while the brakes are on, while the old brakes are on and the old rotor is on, because I'm changing both of them, the brakes and the rotor, you can get in here and use leverage instead of a clamp to depress the pistons. An easy way just to do it is put the screwdriver in there and depress the piston. You see that the other one's going to come out a little bit, so you just rock them back and forth so they're both completely in. And now that brake can come out, and now the piston is also in as well. So when you put the new rotor on, you got the new brakes in. They're going to be a little bit thicker than these. These weren't bad at all, but it's going to be a little bit thicker than these. So it'll just make it easier for you when you go to put everything back together, because this caliper is a monster. It's 4-piston. Look at my hand. I can palm a basketball, so this thing is huge. All right, the next step is there are 6 bolts that hold this on. Now mind you, once again, this is for the F50 F750, 650 series, so I don't exactly know how Hinos or Internationals are held on, but this is for the F series trucks. There are 3 bolts, 3 up top and 3 down bottom, that actually holds the caliper on. Once you get the caliper off, you can just hang it on there and zip tie it up to get it out the way, because it's not being used at this moment. Oh, one thing I should mention is also impact sockets. So that was a 17 millimeter right there. The bolts that will be taken off next are actually 21 millimeters. And like I said, there's 3 of them back here. So what you're gonna have to do, especially if you're using an impact wrench and not manpower, is this bracket right here. You're gonna have to take these 2 off so you can remove this bracket to get your impact or whatever, air or battery power, something up in there. And even if you were using, well, I wouldn't suggest using manpower, only because you're just gonna get yourself tired. It's best to just get the right tool for the job if you can afford it, which I assume if you're in this realm of vehicle, you can afford the right type of tools to make this job easy for you. But these 2 bolts right here have to come off, and they're 13 millimeters. So you got to take these 2 off to remove this brake bracket so you can get the impact in there. Okay, we got a little bit of a problem. So this bolt actually broke inside of there. Not a huge issue. There is grease inside of there and it's still on there. So I'm gonna have to do something about that later to extract that bolt out. Another thing, keep shop towels. When you're holding an expensive camera and you got all this grease in your hand, don't ruin one piece of equipment while trying to fix another. When I say she's heavy, I mean it. That thing is extremely heavy. So as you can see, I got the rotor off, and now you can see the little damage that I'm talking about. I don't like it. I didn't have any problems stopping on the way here, but that's a lot of wear. So I'm gonna go ahead. That's why I went ahead and decided to change these things, because I could see that through the tire, through the rim. So the next step is these bolts right here have to come out, and this is gonna come out to reveal a castle nut and a locking nut. There's oil in here, so I'm gonna put the oil pan up under here to catch the oil that's gonna come out. It's not a whole bunch, but it'll fill this cap. So it's enough to fill this cap and overflow this cap. So that's a decent amount of oil. So I'm gonna go ahead and put some under here to catch the oil. These bolts are also 13 millimeter as well. And like I said, what I'll show you is I'll take this off. It's just a rubber cap. Well, see, this is technically a bad indicator. I'm actually low on the oil in here. As you can see, it should actually be pouring out, and it's not. So the oil was actually low in here. What oil, Warren? What oil are you talking about? Glad you asked. Hub oil. This is what you have to use for the front of this. So I actually bought 2 bottles because I didn't exactly know how much would be in there, but I'd barely used half this bottle, and 1 bottle will work for both sides basically. Now this is somewhat sealed on, really, but not really. And this one barely has any oil in it. So I'll let this drain for a little bit. See that little bit of oil? It's supposed to be a lot more than that in here. I checked the bearing on the other side because I didn't replace the bearing, and the bearing actually looks pretty decent. It's just low on oil basically. And they spin nicely. I hear no binding. Sounds good, sounds nice and quiet the way it should be. So as far as the bearing goes, I haven't replaced the bearing. And then there's no pitting on the bearing. You can actually look at the bearings and see there's no pitting on it. There's no real damage to the bearing. They look really good. It's just basically low on oil. And how do you tell if it's low on oil? I'll show you. The outside of this ring, well, the inside of it, I should say, is actually see-through. See how you can see? So there's a level, there's an arrow right there. So you're supposed to make it halfway. And that's how you fill this thing back up. You take this spout off, fill it back up, and you know, that's pretty much it. Not that hard of a job. So anybody that wants to tackle this themselves, they can. Now, when I say you need a little strength to do this, this is easy. All of this is easy. This piece is heavy. The rotors are 40 pounds themselves. Plus this component right here, which is a solid chunk of steel. This gets really heavy. I want to say it's maybe 85, 90 pounds. No joke. So be careful if you're going to tackle this type of job, because this thing is really heavy. Now, there are mechanics out there smaller than me that do this all day. You can do it if you feel comfortable doing it, if you're capable of doing it, but I just want to let you know, be careful. This thing is extremely heavy. All right, the next step, we got a cotter pin right here. Unfold this cotter pin, take the castle nut off, and then take the main nut off after that, and it's pretty much downhill from there. Now, the nut that's on here has no torque, no tension on it. It's basically just there to keep the hub from coming off. Okay, so here goes the castle nut, and this thing is just hand tight. You see that? I haven't torqued anything, haven't touched it. It's just hand tight. That's it. So once I start taking this off, this thing is basically going to fall off. So I'm going to move the oil bucket out the way. I'll put some rags down. Once I take this off and start sliding things out, the bearing is just going to slide out. There's a rear bearing as well. That's the same size and dimension. And this bad boy is basically just going to slide out and be heavy, basically. So here we go. Bearing. I will inspect this before I put it back in. Just to make sure it is reusable. All right, here goes the hard part. All right. Oh boy. And my caliper fell. All right, we're on the downhill slope now. This is the back of the rotor. And see, you see how bad it is? And look, the brake wasn't even hitting barely, so there was definitely something going on with these brakes, which that's why I'm changing them. These bolts right here are the ones that I showed you from the front. This seal stays in. Seal looks good. I'm not too worried about the seal. Basically what I'll do is I'll just clean everything up on the back, scrape off as much of this gunk as I can, and when the rotor comes off, a lot of this is the rotor. So all of this is the rotor. So that's all brand new. I'm not worried about that. I'm just going to clean this surface right here. And here's where fresh batteries and the impact comes in handy. Which, see, they're so rusty, barely taking the bolt. These are 3/4. At least that's what I used on them. I don't know the millimeter. I didn't have the. So basically, I'm gonna spray these, kind of get them lubed up a little, Anybody who works in HVAC knows what this stuff is. This stuff is a super penetrator. So I'm gonna start using the impact and just knocking each one of these out. And it pulls so hard that it literally messes up the front of the thread. I'll show you when that happens. Okay, now I warned you, this piece is heavy. So now it's basically just rusted together, and I'm gonna take my sledgehammer and beat the rotor off. I had to come put it in the grass so to stop rolling. But once I beat it off, it's basically just gonna fall off once the rust gets off of it. Don't roll. Now roll. Almost there. And that's it. I'm gonna clean all of this out, make sure it's nice and clean before I put anything back in. When it comes to the knuckle itself, you don't have to grease this at this moment. I basically just cleaned it off, got it ready. When you put it back on, there's gonna be a fill port so you can lube all of this shaft up and everything. So right now, I'm about ready to put the rotor back on top of the hub assembly. Basically, line it up, put it back together. Really that simple. And I got a degreaser, so I'm gonna degrease these rotors before I do any real type of braking. All right, people, put your seats in an upright position as we attempt to land this puppy. Got the rotor on, nice and snug, back the way it was before. So basically, all you got to do is pick this bad boy up, put it on the knuckle, and then kind of secure it real quick while you put the bearing back in. Once you put the bearing back in, it's going to hold it, and then you can put the nut on and put the castle nut on. Beautimus. And that is basically new rotor on. So once I put this cap back on, then I can fill it with grease. Before I do that, I'm going to clean the rotor and put the caliper on, put the new brakes in, and this job will be complete. This is the fill cap. Just go ahead and take it off real quick. Got a little rubber gasket on it. Make sure you don't lose that because this thing does spin. Put this one on first. Remember, these are 13 millimeters. Not crazy tight. Actually, not really that tight at all. It's just holding in a little bit of hub oil. You overdo it, you will break these. I am using the gun, but I'm just basically just tapping on it to get it to go in. No real torque on that. There's a little error on this side. So, and as it gets close, I'll put in the cap. And then I can see it start to fill. You literally can see it start to fill. Just takes a couple seconds. And that's it. It's at the line. Put the cap back in. Snug it. This is plastic, so no need to be a barbarian with it. You're just trying to squish that rubber gasket, and that's good enough. Silence. That's what you want to hear. Let it lube it up in there. That's what you want to hear, silence. All right, we are in the last phase of this project. And the last thing you got to do, I got the caliper on, is basically just slide them in. Now, if you push these back the way you're supposed to, they should just slide right in without any resistance. See that? They slide right in. And you basically put the hardware back on it. It's kind of resistant a little, which is good. Put the bolt back in. And this is another one that we're just This is another one. You don't need to over crank if you're going to use an impact. That's good. So now the brakes are in. A little offset, but that's fine. But we still got free play. So that's basically it. Anybody who has the physical strength and the tools can do this job. This is a commercial vehicle, but at the same time, you can save yourself, I'm pretty sure, $600, $700, $800, maybe even a cool grand by changing these front rotors and rear rotors yourself. Now with the rear, you have a little bit more hardware to deal with. 4 tires that are all heavy as I don't know what, and some seals that you have to deal with. So you got to make sure you have the right seals for the rear. So I just showed the front. But yeah, as far as operating, it should operate just as it did before. So right now, I'm pretty much done out here with this. That's pretty much all I think I need to pass inspection. So yeah, I guess we'll go ahead and clean up and call this one done.